Hi guys, so we're gonna go ahead and solve another system of equations by substitution. Why substitution? Because the direction says so. So use this technique or else. So so refresher, to solve a system by substitution, we're gonna pick an equation, solve for a variable, and then substitute that expression into the other equation we didn't use. So let's go ahead and number these 1 and 2. So ideally, it would be nice if we had a variable whose coefficient was 1 or -1, and if that's not the case, then we'll talk about it later. But in this case, we have a variable whose coefficient is 1 or -1. So let's go ahead solve for that. So let's talk to ourselves. We want to write down, let's look at the first equation and solve for m. So I'm going to say, look at the first equation and solve for m. So of course I paraphrase that because we don't have time for that. So let's look at 1 and solve for m. So the first equation reads m plus 2n equals 4. We want to solve for m, so we'll subtract 2n from both sides, and that will give us m equals whatever your heart desires. So you can put -2n plus 4 or 4 minus 2n. It doesn't matter. I just like starting on positive notes, so that's why I put the constant term first. So substitution, how does that work? So substitution says pick an equation, solve for a variable, and then you're going to substitute this expression into the other equation you didn't use. We already used the first equation, so let's plug it into the second one. So we're going to say sub into 2. Okay, so the second equation reads 2n plus 4n equals -8. And we have a nifty expression for the variable m. So wherever we see m, we're gonna replace it with 4 minus 2n or -2n plus 4, depending on how you want to write it. So we have 2 times the expression for m, which is 4 minus 2n or -2n plus 4 plus 4n equals -8. Once we do the substitution, like I feel like I can breathe. I mean, you should always breathe, but you know what I mean. So once I do the substitution, I feel like I can breathe because before, every equation that we had 2 variables. Okay, but now we only have 1 variable. So at this point, we're gonna solve for that 1 variable that we see, which is n. So we're gonna work our magic, solve for n. Once we're done with that, we're gonna go ahead solve for m. Okay, so let's go ahead, clear the grouping symbol. So product of 2 and 4 is 8. Product of 2 and -2n is -4n. Let's bring down the rest of the problem. So let's go ahead, continue to simplify the left side. -4n plus 4n. I'm having a moment, but I trust myself. The sum is 0 or we cancel out, and that will leave us with 8 equals -8. And I'm having a big moment, so I thought it was like cool. I thought like I was like cool when it comes to mathematics, but then I get something like this, and then I'm like, what's happening? So if you want to see the look on my face, that's exactly what my face looks like. Well, that's a lie. That's not me. It's just something that I found on the internet. But this expresses how I feel. Like that's kind of weird. What was happening? Okay, so the question is, should I subtract 8 from both sides? Should I try to add 8 to both sides? And the answer is neither one. We were trying to solve for n. That didn't happen. So this is how it's going to go down. When you're solving a system of equations, if the variables cancel out, then you need to ask yourself this question. Do I have a true or false statement? Okay? Do I have a true or false statement? Well, last time I checked, 8 does not equal -8. So this is a false statement. Okay, so when you're solving a system of equations, if the variables cancel out and you end up with the false statement, then the system has no solution. Which kind of makes sense, because if the system doesn't have a solution, then they don't have anything in common. So there's no way we can find an m or an n. So that's it. Now the question you may ask, what if we ended up with a true statement? Well, that's for the next problem. So for this one, we're good to go. Thanks.